Brazil.
Good morning, everyone. We have the job to get to do the most exciting thing this morning, which is announce some awards. We're going to wait for the slides to come up. So this year we were able to award another round of DEI Scholars. DEI Scholars is a way that FACT has chosen to spend additional funds that we have in order to invest back in our community and make sure that we're using our money to make sure that we have the biggest impact and support junior scholars. And so with that, we get to announce the awards. So this year we chose to focus on giving seed funding to early career scholars to enact their envision of positive algorithmic futures. We chose to prioritize people who had paid the diversity tax, people who've done DEI labor, and we wanted to really give them a chance to think about the more positive things and do the research they want to do with these seed funds. We had a total of 57 applications. We pre-screened them and then gave everyone 2 reviews, as long as they had met the kind of followed instructions. We then had a committee discussion to finalize our awards. We were supposed to award 4, and then we begged the general chairs for extra money. We were able to give 5 awards. So these people receive seed funding and connection to future funders. So we're gonna use the connections, the foundation connections, that FACT has built up over the years that has support the conference. We're gonna introduce these junior scholars to those people to help them continue their projects beyond what our seed funds can support them with. And then we have 6 honorable mentions. We want to celebrate them here, appreciate them, and we'll be connecting them with other resources as well. So we don't have funds for them today, but we were so inspired by their proposals and their ideas and the work that they've done that we wanna give them the connections that we have. And with that,
here are our awardees. We have Armanda Lewis with the project Generative AI and Resistance to Scale, Rachelle Dion Walker with the project Data Activism and Programs, Izine Nankowo, Data-Driven Street Outreach, and Helena Hailu Ndikatu with the project A Gender-Sensitive, Community-Centered Approach to Machine Translation, and Isidoro Valenderas Asuncao with the project Bridging Initiative and Ethics, Context-Specific Recommendations for Leveraging University Industry Partnerships for Responsible AI Development.
give a brief applause for our awardees.
And then we have our lovely, lovely folks we wanted to lift up as well that had really great projects. So we can give a round of applause for them as well.
Congratulations to all our awardees, and especially to our honorable mentions. We look forward to supporting them as we can build over time.
Yay.
We'll pass to the general chairs now.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. Here we are with some announcements.
Yes, so the lunch will still be in the third floor today and the rest of the days. I think it worked much better than the first day, and I hope you were happy eating in a table and seated. Also, if you have any issue, please tell any volunteer, okay? If you have any problem, even people tell issues through email to us, like virtual problems, so it's okay. And we try to fix the streaming problem through the internet provider, so I hope the people that is online don't have any more issues. And Meg?
Fantastic. So every year we get to try something a little different, and this year one of the other things that is brand new in the program are artistic interventions. You're used to seeing craft and tutorials, but you have never seen at FAccT an art installation, and that is exactly what we have two of this year. The first one is called Artisanal AI, an art exhibition for embodied understandings of data work. And if you've already been up in the Grumari room, you will have seen Yamariam Mamo working on an installation that helps take crowd work, data labor, from being a topic that we research or speakers that we've had on this stage in the past to something that is an embodied experience for understanding the physicality of data labor and what that might do to you through embodied experiences. So this is a really exciting installation. There's been a lot of work and thought put into it. Please go to the Grumari room and engage with this art exhibit. The second one has a really exciting and speculative title that might make you think that it's canceled, but it is not canceled. The title is Futures for FACT Conference 2045 canceled. And the idea is, what would the world need to look like for us to be able to cancel FACT? This is a speculative art exhibit that you can envision together with the artist Freya Vandenboom, and we're really excited to have this one as well. There's more of a performance art element, so I hope that you go to the Pontal room and engage with that piece. Now we're ready to introduce our keynote, and I was talking to someone yesterday who said that one of the things that really stands out about our community is our policy presence here. And we are so lucky to have this person speaking with us today, because in a flurry of activity happening at the United States Federal Trade Commission, this person took time out of her schedule to come and join us, hear about the work that we're doing, and tell us what research questions would be most policy ready, most ready to be picked up and carried forward through regulation and other kinds of administrative action. So Stephanie Nguyen is the chief technologist at the Federal Trade Commission. She brings over a decade of leadership building and designing technical products and services across government, academia, civil society, and industry, specializing in human-computer interaction design and investigatory research. Prior to her tenure at FTC, Stephanie worked on an investigative research at Consumer Reports at the US Digital Service at the Obama White House, and as a research scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie Nguyen.
Good morning. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you. Thank you to the organizers who've been running up and down the stairs, in and out of the elevators, in every single room to make this entire event run incredibly smoothly. To the leaders, the volunteers, the organizers, thank you so much for bringing us all together so that we convene, and most importantly, to figure out what are we gonna do after this week? What are we gonna do in our normal day-to-days and how we spend our hours and our time in our work? I also wanted to thank you to Deputy CTO Amrita Jayanthi, do you mind raising your hand, who's here with me today, Alex Gaynor, Noam Cantor, my team members, FTC colleagues, and Chair Lena Khan, without whom none of the work that I get to share today would be possible. So this morning, one of the things that I do in my daily is I have to stay up to date with the news. What is happening? The world is changing every second of the day. And so just this morning, my feed included stories on rental fee collusion, surveillance pricing at the grocery store, junk fees with buying airline tickets, general inflation across the marketplace. How many people want to hold unchecked corporate power accountable? Raise your hand. Cool. Me too. I'm Stephanie Nguyen, Chief Technologist at the Office of Technology at the FTC. Remarks are my own and nobody else's at the Commission. And I'm here to talk about how my team and I are doing this work and how to spark better ways to help this momentum continue. So, to start, what is the FTC, for those of you who don't know? The mission of our agency is to protect consumers against unfair and deceptive acts and practices and unfair methods of competition. Or in other words, what we do every day is to ensure that consumers, workers, and businesses don't get tricked, they don't get bullied, and they don't get coerced. So, this image, what's going on here? This is where I work. This is in Washington, D.C., 600 Pennsylvania Avenue. What you'll see here is a horse, which represents industry. It's dynamic energy, could go on a rampage. It's going to move fast and probably break some things, and it might lead to a path of destruction. This muscle man figure is gripping the horse's reins. It's federal government, whose intelligence, whose strength wrangles the horse to a useful purpose. And I wanted to start off by sharing this symbol of the purpose behind the work that we do. Dr. Sita Peña Gangadharan teed up an incredible keynote yesterday talking about the state of surveillance technologies, talking about the development of how more tech could facilitate the undoing of so much of our societal norms, and going more upstream to focus on our interventions. So, inspired by her talk, along with many of the sessions yesterday, I changed a little bit of this keynote today to build on the foundations that not only Sita, but the rest of you had set in many of the sessions. So she talked about the great undoing. Today's keynote theme is the great doing. Now that a lot of stuff has been undone, what are we doing? What are we going to do about it? So, there's a lot happening at the FTC for those of you who might be following. But just to recap some of the top headlines in the past few months, the agency issued a ban on non-competes, which impacts 30 million workers, hairdressers, nurses, doctors, bartenders, and engineers who want the ability to be able to leave their jobs for better pay. The commission also challenged over 100 junk patent listings on medical devices, including asthma inhalers, EpiPens, and weight loss drugs, which could inflate the price of prescription drugs. The agency also banned Rite Aid for their use of facial recognition technologies for 5 years, which the commission alleged falsely tagged women and people of color as shoplifters, leaving many of these folks humiliated and facing other harms. And last year, the commission voted to establish the Office of Technology, which is my office, and we've spent over the past year hiring up the team of the best designers, engineers, investigative data journalists, researchers, product managers in the country. So there's a lot of value to be unlocked here in this room between researchers, between experts, and between us at the agency. So, anyone who has worked in government knows that navigating complex systems and services that are meant to serve 300 million Americans can be a brick wall. I've spent years seeing everyday people slam their heads against the wall trying to repay student loans, navigate citizenship, apply for Medicaid. And so when our agency, the Federal Trade Commission, does things like issue requests for information, RFIs, notice of proposed rulemakings, NPRMs, more acronyms, non-government practitioners will come up to me and say things like, what does a comment actually do in practice? How do I even submit a comment? How do I make sure that my submission includes files that don't exceed 10 megabytes? And is any of this worth my time? Are you guys listening? The short of it is we are, and we're paying attention. And beyond opaque brick walls, I wanted to focus on one word, which is sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum of a brick wall, which is transparency. So what does it mean for something to be transparent? I wanted to break down this term a little bit. It means it's a property. It lets light pass through an object so you can see the thing behind it. It's also the quality of being readily understood. It also means making information available and accessible to others. Journalist Karen Howe has described this term, or often how it's perceived in industry, as meaning, quote, revealing a company's data and code. But transparency without accountability can lead to shortcomings, as we all know. And a good example of this is the notice and choice regime. Companies may deploy notice and choice in the form of privacy policies in terms of service pop-ups to signal they're enabling consumer control. And as Chair Khan outlined in the 2010s, Web 2.0, the establishment of social media companies set the foundation for the surveillance economy, where businesses could gouge consumers for their data in exchange for a free service that would allow people to scroll infinitely, would allow them to click on things, engage with their friends, get updates, and thumbs up features from people in their networks. Transparency by consumer notice and choice is broken. It has failed. It doesn't work. Many people at the agency have said this publicly, and we're trying to figure out what are we going to do next. I've learned this through years of firsthand experience as a designer of these interfaces, where I've yet to see a level of designing iconography and features that would make a human fully understand the complexities of a massive data collecting system. So achieving transparency doesn't fix problematic processes, and it may place burden on other people to decipher that information. It's sort of like this picture, where if you were to strip fresh paint off a ship to see that the hull is corroding, it can cause the floors to sag, the walls to crack, and the ship to eventually sink. So, in the spirit of the great doing, how does our team think about our work? One guiding North Star and principle that Chair Khan outlined is scrutinizing how business models drive incentives. And I'm going to say this in a different way. In the work that we're doing, we should ask ourselves, what is the firm's business model? What do they want, and how will they get it? Let's use an example. Amassing consumer data is often a tech company's primary motivation and source of economic power. This incentive can create data asymmetries between the firm and the consumer. But to do this, companies will design advertisements, interfaces, onboarding experiences, and on-app experiences that will get you to sign up and will get you to stay on their platforms or services. How can companies get to the point where they can do these things? Consolidation of power. One of the top reasons for mergers is aggregating data. And these two things, consumer protection and competition, are exactly what our agency's remit is designed to focus on. So, transparency through notice and choice alone cannot remedy this steamship's corroding hull. And notice and choice has had the opposite effect of what it intended to do. Instead of informing and empowering users, it's emboldened corporations to recklessly amass consumer data. So, once we identify sources for corrosion, what can actually be done here, and what can you do to boost this mission? I'm going to share a bit about our Office of Technology. I'm going to share a little bit about how we approach our work. I'm going to talk about some harms that we are facing in the work that we're doing, and then I'm going to land with open questions. I don't think this talk will take the full hour, so my hope is that we can have a bit of back and forth. But I'm going to start off with our team. The Office of Technology is a team of about a dozen technologists, the best in the country of the US. People on our team love technology. We spent much of our careers on focusing on technology, building it, designing it, deploying it, reporting on it, studying it, and how it impacts people. And with the increased digitization of the economy, we define our work across tech broadly, as industries now have critical tech components across things like finance, healthcare, and transportation. And I'm largely optimistic of the role that tech advancements have in how they could improve how we live or work or communicate. And I'm also excited to see how other enforcement agencies like the Department of Justice, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, can use their role to continue to cultivate this outcome. It's a core part of why I'm optimistic and why I'm at the Federal Trade Commission. It's because we've helped reconfigure the bones of the agency, the piping, to make sure that there are tech savants in the building. There's a box on the org chart here to stay, to internally help our teams, regardless of the moment we are in our lives. So, over a year ago, the FTC was established with 3 core principles, the ones listed here. We work directly on cases and enforcement. There's about 800 attorneys that we work every day with. We serve as internal experts on policy and research, and then finally we engage and inform outside stakeholders like you all to advance the Commission's work, to learn from you, to make sure that we hear your expert view on what's happening in the economy. Here's a picture of a few of our team members last year. Just wanted to show you a bit of what this looks like. Here are some team members, and if you squint, you might be able to see some of the titles of the book. Somebody's reading Spam Wars, somebody's reading How You Can Use Statistics to Lie, somebody is looking at Software and Engineering as a case law book. Somebody is a privacy engineer who has worked on strengthening privacy defaults for children. One is a software engineer and a journalist who built open source Tor browser for iPhone. Another is an investigative data journalist who covered algorithmic discrimination in the gig economy. And another is a software engineer who has looked into the practical impacts and underpinnings of pixel tracking. Oh, and this is Lena Khan, my boss, the boss, head of the Federal Trade Commission. She has been joined in 2021 and is a key reason behind not only why our team is here today, but why we're working on so many of the things that I'm going to explain in this chat. So in the spirit of looking upstream at incentives, what are the Office of Technology's incentives? For us, our team's bottom line is not a big tech acquisition, it's not an IPO, it's not publishing papers, and it's not amassing more users to make money off ads. It's protecting the American public, its workers, and its businesses from unfair and deceptive acts and practices and unfair methods of competition. And as part of our mandate, we want to meaningfully engage to better strengthen and support our law enforcement work. So we want to listen and learn today. I'm excited about the work here. I read through the paper topics accepted and was really excited to see some of the topics with a wide range of overlap with our work, such as the legal duty to search for less discriminatory algorithms, mitigating AI harms in the workplace and in homeless services, research on open weight models to increase competition. These are spot on. We want to share what we're doing, and then we want to find intersections and new ways to engage with you in a timely way, since things are moving really quickly. So we've covered that transparency through notice and choice is broken. We've highlighted a key inflection point as new technologies like generative AI take shape, and we've covered a bit more about our team and what we do. Now we're going to dive into how we do it. I'm going to outline a framework that illustrates the work we do toward this North Star of anchoring our work on business model incentives. And there are three key pieces to this framework. Peeling back the layers of the tech stack, examining hidden middleman layers, and then a crackdown on mass data collectors. So first, peeling back layers of the tech stack. One way to examine foundational business incentives is to look at different layers. I'm going to talk about three today: chips, cloud computing, and AI partnerships and investments. First, on semiconductor chips, as many of you already know, these are essential hardware components for things like refrigerators, laptops, MRI machines, navigation systems. We spoke with a chip startup founder during a recent tech summit on AI who explained to investors, we're going to compete with the largest companies in the world, and we're not actually sure if they're ever going to buy our chips because they're making their own chips. Regulation from agencies like ours can continue to bolster innovation to ensure that founders like Dave can actually compete on a more level playing field. Back in 2021, the FTC blocked NVIDIA's attempted acquisition of ARM, which would have been the largest semiconductor chip merger in history. And despite this regulatory action, NVIDIA has remained the leading chip maker in the AI arms race with a surging stock valuation. And ARM ended up going public and has forward earnings that is even more than double NVIDIA's. On cloud computing, we've issued a request for information, and we got back a bunch of comments from folks across the industry. We learned so much from this, including things like software licensing practices that can limit a company's ability to use certain software. And then egress fees might be really high. It could be really easy to take your data into a certain environment, but more expensive to take it out. And this year, on AI partnerships and investments, Amrita led an AI 6B, which is an authority that our agency has to send questions to anybody in the market. It is a market study function tool. We send subpoena questions, companies have to respond in the spirit of learning what is going on. So we issued orders to 5 companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Anthropic, and OpenAI, requiring them to provide information regarding recent investments and partnerships. And again, to better understand what is actually going on in this field with these billion-dollar investments. How does it work? What is each party getting out of this partnership? Here, the agency is scrutinizing information as it relates to the core agreements, to the implications of the partnerships, and the competitive impacts of competition and of these AI inputs and resources. Second, we're going to examine hidden middleman layers. And I want to focus first on pixel tracking. The agency took enforcement action against GoodRx and BetterHelp, 2 digital health platforms, for allegedly sharing health data with third parties. Tracking pixels, as many of you know, have evolved from tiny pixel-sized images on web pages to more of a broad range of HTML and JavaScript embedded in websites and an email. They're invisible to users, and there's really no way for consumers to avoid it. They lack clarity around collection and use, and even if there are some attempts to remove personal information from pixel tracking methods, they can still, in fact, leak enough information to identify an individual. Both cases, in GoodRx and BetterHelp, allege the use of third-party tracking pixels, which can enable platforms to amass, analyze, and infer info about consumer activity. Next is on data collectors. Earlier this year, staff highlighted a few matters that reflect a heightened focus on pervasive extraction and mishandling of personal data. This story will sound very familiar to you. The FTC alleged that Xmode Social, InMarket, and Avast, 2 data brokers and a software service, extracted, shared, and sold sensitive data to entities, including to private government, including to advertisers, without obtaining their consent. And through these middleman cases, staff highlighted that browsing and location data are sensitive, full stop. Purpose matters. Firms do not have the free license to market, sell, and monetize people's information beyond purposes to provide their product or service. And firms really shouldn't let their business model incentives that focus on the bottom line outweigh the need for privacy safeguards that are actually meaningful. And third is price fixing by algorithms. One final example to highlight this hidden middleman layer is when landlords and property managers use software to collude on rental pricing. Rent is up 20% in the US since 2020, with the largest increases concentrated on apartments rented by lower income consumers. Landlords and property management companies have outsized leverage over their tenants and can fix their final prices to drive up rent prices, all which would be obfuscated from a consumer's apartment search. And as a response, the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice filed a joint legal brief that explains price fixing through an algorithm is still price fixing. So, continuing in the spirit of the great doing, the third part of this framework is to look at remedies that go a little bit more upstream to prevent harms. And by remedy here, I'm referring to the changes that companies are required to make, either due to an FTC settlement or a judgment. I wanted to actually show you a little bit of an anatomy of casework to orient you. This is a press release. If you go to FTC press release, you can just look down a series of news that our agency and actions that the agency is coming out with every day. This is a press release that goes into more detail on a case when there's an announcement. And the two highlighted pieces are a link to two critical components of a case. First is the complaint, where one party sues another party, and this document explains how the company caused the harm, who's the company, what are they about, and how does the FTC have jurisdiction over this. I'd highly recommend even just reading this. It kind of reads like a narrative, so you can get a sense of like who the company is, what is going on, how the companies are working with each other, what are the designers saying, what decisions are being made. And ultimately, actually this one is Fortnite, Epic Games in Fortnite, which, some of them actually have like screenshots of different components of the body of evidence that the attorneys and the technologists pulled together in the case. So these are all public. Second is the order, which tells a party what they should do. These are just like Microsoft Word screenshots of text, but it's an order which tells a party what they should do and includes remedies. And so this is part of what I wanted to talk about today. When I talk about remedies, I'm talking about the stuff in this document, which are changes required to make due to an FTC settlement. And I'm going to walk through a series of these remedies, which fall in the order that get more upstream at the root cause of harm. And these three things are bans and disgorgement, data use restrictions on sensitive information, and then product defaults. What are the norms to begin with? First, algorithm and models. I'm going to give you a few examples of bans and disgorgement. The agency issued a series of orders highlighting how to get more upstream by addressing how to ban, disgorge, or delete ill-gotten data that actually powers models or algorithms. The first is the ban on the use of facial recognition technology. In practice, these are the words that say that. In its action against Rite Aid, again, the commission alleged that the company falsely tagged consumers, mostly women and people of color, as shoplifters. So there's a ban on using this technology because they were unable to actually deploy reliable technology in the market. The agency also required data deletion of biometric information and mandated that their surveillance system monitoring, which requires the company to test and assess and measure and document and inquire about any accuracy, that they actually do these things before deploying new technologies. And also, the order prevents the use of low-quality data and images to reduce the likelihood of such false positive matches. So this is a really interesting order, and I would highly recommend you all read it, especially if some of these themes resonate with you. Here's another example on model and algorithmic disgorgement. In another recent action, the commission alleged that photo app developer Everalbum deceived consumers about its use of facial recognition technology and the retention of photos and videos of users who already deactivated their accounts. So here, the FTC ordered the company to delete the photos and the videos and disgorge the models and the algorithms that it developed using this ill-gotten data. Here's another example. It's a ban on using ill-gotten data to train or improve algorithms. When the commission alleged that Amazon's voice assistant, Alexa, violated the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act rule and deceived parents and users of its data deletion practices, the order mandated deletion for inactive users and banned the company from using ill-gotten location and children's voice information to train or improve its algorithms. All right, more examples. Data use restrictions on sensitive information. I'm going to give you some examples on how we've done this. First is a ban on sharing health data for ads. The commission alleged that GoodRx, which is a telehealth company and prescription drug provider, failed to notify consumers of its disclosures, where they were sharing consumers' personal health data to Facebook, to Google, and to other companies. In response, our agency took enforcement action to ban the company from sharing or selling health data for advertising. Another example is a ban on selling browsing data for ads. Again, as you all know, browsing data can reveal a lot of sensitive information about consumers' daily lives and needs. And so in a FAccT, which is one of our cases, they said they would protect the privacy of users' browsing data, but instead they sold all of this information to third parties. So in the order, which some of this highlights here, it banned them from selling browsing data to third parties for advertising purposes and required data and model deletion from ill-gotten data. More examples, a ban on selling location data for ads. When the commission alleged that data broker Xmode Social failed to obtain informed consent, we prohibited the companies from selling that sensitive location data. On product defaults, a lot of times we're thinking about dark patterns and how dark patterns can harm people. We think about the massive taxonomy of the different ways that companies can do things differently than what they are marketing and saying. But I actually think it's important to shift toward what are the norms that are being baked into the products or services that hit millions of users every day. And so another example is through Epic Games and Fortnite. In the game, the app enabled voice and text chat by default, which the commission alleged was an unfair practice, and it put a lot of kids and teens in risky contact with strangers. And so we secured an order requiring stronger privacy settings to protect children and teens. In a series of actions against Amazon and its top executives, the FTC charged that the use of dark patterns to trap people in subscriptions is unlawful, as the BCP director recently said. And finally, we have a whole policy statement on illegal dark patterns that puts companies on notice that signups must be clear, consensual, and easy to cancel. Think gym memberships, where the only way to unsubscribe is to mail a physical letter to a PO box and to wait until hopefully your credit card stops getting charged. So I want to move on to my final segment of the work. That's a little bit of how we think and some of the remedies that we put out. And I want to highlight some of the problems that we're facing in the work that we're doing. First is on smoke, mirrors, and veneers. Marketing and advertising is directly tied to a company's business model. So when I say business model, I mean things like, do they make money off of advertising, franchising, retail? Is it a freemium model? Is it a subscription? Understanding how a company generates revenue can be useful to looking at a way that a product or service is actually positioned to sell to users or businesses. In 2012, FTC Chief Technologist Ed Felten outlined a blog post called, "Does Hashing Make Data Anonymous?" Spoiler, hashing is a vastly overrated anonymization technique. Felten has said this, we have said this, all of you know this, to continue to explain why hashing often fails to provide effective anonymity. Even a decade later, after this blog post has been released, we continue to hear similar claims. A key point in terms of privacy and privacy-enhancing technologies is that practices exist on a spectrum of data access. Not all implementations of privacy-enhancing technologies reach the fully private end of the spectrum. And companies that make representations to consumers about their use of pets must follow the law and ensure that any privacy claims or representations are accurate. In 1994, this was actually in one of our orders that we dug up, the FTC complaint highlighted that a company called Hayes Microcomputer Products ran really dramatic ads which falsely claimed that any modem implementing what was known as a, quote, time-independent escape sequence was a, quote, bomb waiting to go off, which would destroy your modem's ability to function. This is actually real. To protect themselves, they advertised that the consumer needed to buy a new modem with the technology patented by Hayes so that they could prevent that bomb from going off, or so Hayes claimed. So this is a nice lesson where tech evolves so quickly, even in 1994. to 2024, companies cannot make baseless marketing claims about hashing, about AI, about safety, about privacy-enhancing technologies, and about security. The list goes on and on. So it's imperative that we have people like you in the room, who can better assess these claims and hold companies accountable. Another key theme that we see often in our work, because our team works across competition and consumer protection, is integrating these two concepts. It's possible that there are ways where these two elements might collide. And one example is through open models, large language models, and competition. Open models with widely available weights have a strong potential to be a positive force for innovation and competition. But at the same time, the capabilities and conditions attached to using open weights models can vary significantly, which may change how the models affect competition. For example, restrictions on who can use the models, how the models can be used, including commercial use by large companies, may lower the competitive value of those open models. And in parallel, on the consumer protection front, we know that there are current-day harms and risks that consumers face with open models, where malicious actors can more easily conduct spam, scam, and disinformation campaigns and spread horrifying, non-consensual, intimate imagery. Another example of this collision of competition and consumer protection is interoperability and privacy and security. Sometimes, in the face of concerns about anti-competitive conduct, companies might claim privacy and security as reasons and justifications for having their products and services interoperate with other companies' products. While certain safeguards for privacy and security can impede interoperability, our team has said publicly, interoperability can coexist with privacy and security and even enhance them in some contexts. Another example that our team has led where there's a collision of competition and consumer protection is in AI and the creative economy. Last November, our office led a virtual roundtable inviting creative professionals across music and filmmaking, software development, and other fields to discuss the ways that generative AI is reshaping their respective industries. Conduct that may violate the copyright laws may also constitute an unfair method of competition or unfair or deceptive practice, especially when the copyright violation deceives consumers, exploits a creator's reputation, or diminishes the value of her existing future work. And lastly, another category of things we're seeing is the old, new ways. Finally, AI-enabled voice cloning. Speech synthesis in general has significantly advanced over the decades. Think Stephen Hawking, and with advancements of this technology, everyday people can be targeted with fraudulent extortion scams and has had their voices misappropriated in ways that could jeopardize their ability to earn income. So we held a voice cloning challenge to prevent the harms of AI-enabled voice cloning. We got a lot of submissions from folks in academia and in research institutions and in industry to better understand what are ways that people can mitigate this harm. So the incentives for these bad actors are financial gain through anonymity, more or less. And they will continue to commit frauds and scams and extort and target vulnerable people to make money. On cars and consumer data, cars have evolved over time, and many of them now are digitally connected, which can allow consumers to play their favorite music or unlock their cars with an app. They can also collect massive amounts of information, including biometric information, including their location, similar to how we've seen with in-home devices and the Internet of Things. And then back to our normal theme of bait and switches with notice and choice. We know that data is the new oil. We know that companies want more data to fuel AI products, and we also need to protect their users' privacy. Companies might use their dense legalese to quickly change course through a bait and switch and modify their terms of service or their privacy policies. It may be unfair or deceptive for a company to adopt more permissive data practices, for example, to start sharing consumers' data with third parties, or using that data for AI training, and only to inform those consumers of this change through a surreptitious, retroactive amendment to their terms of service. We already changed these terms, FYI. Moving on is basically the message. All right, so the path ahead. The goal of this session was to share what we are doing, how we're working, and hopefully through this sampling, I've sparked at least one area of overlap with you all. And maybe there's a way to continue to engage with people like you moving forward. Last week, we published a list of 20 questions for the research community under this title right here. And what we did is we published 20 questions that span topics including AI-enabled fraud and scams, algorithmic pricing, surveillance and data privacy. And wanted to just recap where we are and then kind of open it up for questions. I outlined limitations of transparency with a focus on the failures of notice and choice. I underscored our North Star to anchor our work by scrutinizing business models and how they drive incentives. I presented a framework that highlights how our team can approach our work, peeling back layers of technology, examining hidden middleman layers, and then designing remedies that go more upstream. And finally, I sampled a set of harms and challenges through our team and what we're working through, which includes topics like smoke and mirrors and veneers, balancing competition and consumer protection, and then just the new old ways. The establishment of our office is just a tiny little notch on the FTC's 114-year plus historical timeline. Our mission and our remit, as you can see, is incredibly expansive, covering chicken farming to art supplies to meat packaging. But we have shown that our capabilities are small but mighty. And if we meet our mandate, regardless of who is in the building, academics and practitioners around the world will continue to engage and push the boundaries of knowledge, of remedies, and hold companies accountable. Finally, I will leave you with these words. Sunshine and transparency is a powerful disinfectant, but why let corrosion take hold in the first place? I was chatting with Meg Young yesterday, raise her hand, and she gave me a really interesting analogy where she was like, this is the moment of dispatch, where if you can think of the moment where you're blowing a dandelion and then the seeds kind of go in some direction, you can hope that these ideas will actually plant a seed in your mind in the work that you're doing. Thank you all for having me, and I'm happy to open up to questions. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna bring my deputy CTO, Amrita, on stage as well.
That's fantastic. Amrita, do you want to take call out the questions? Thank you. That was an incredibly galvanizing talk. Please come. Yeah.
Hello, thank you for your talk. I had a question about facial recognition. So you mentioned that with Rite Aid, they're banned from using facial recognition for 5 years. But while I was flying in, and I'm sure some of y'all who flew in from the States, there was facial recognition in the airports. So does the FTC also have some control over being able to ban facial recognition in airports and like governmental use?
Great question. Very attentive. I think one thing to keep in mind is when the FTC brings a case against a company, the details of the case and the complaint and the order are against the company. So it's very specific to the facts and the evidence of that case, and that rule banning facial recognition technologies for Rite Aid is meant to focus on Rite Aid. However, we also have our rulemaking authority, which is way more expansive. So when we have things like our surveillance rulemaking, that would impact many, many, many more industries and companies. Yes, so there's limitations, I guess, on the Rite Aid order specifically.
All right, thank you so much. This was super interesting. I appreciate your time. A lot of your examples are specific to a particular use case. So I'm just curious how you're thinking about foundation models.
Can you say more, thinking about foundation models in what way?
Sure, foundation models aren't limited to a particular use case. They can do pretty much anything for anybody. So yeah, what are your thoughts about how you might approach that?
Yeah, Yeah, I think, okay, so some of the examples that I've mentioned today, especially where there were remedies relating to data collection, over-collection, use, over-storing, over-retention, aren't fancy AI companies. They're back to the basics with day-to-day data privacy provisions that we know. How are companies collecting the data? How are they storing the data? How are they retaining it? How are they sharing it? How are they selling it? And so in terms of like how large language models are relevant, I mean, that's one way that there's some crossover here, but I would say like oftentimes what we think about is not like, how do we just, look at remedies for the fancy new technology? How do we use our existing rules, our existing laws in the books today? Because we do not have time to invent new laws. Like, that is not our role. Our role today is to ensure that we actually bring cases against companies who are doing this wrongdoing for competition and for consumers. So I would say looking back to like basic principles is a good way that we think about it.
I have
Hi.
the microphone. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
So thank you for your presentation. You have an amazing policy agenda. I'm a full-time academic at a government school, and I study the intersections between policy and technology. So I'm very aware of my positionality with regards to technology. I try not to hate it or love it, but just it's my object of investigation. And you mentioned that the dozen people that work with you have prior experience designing technology and so forth, and you said they love technology. So I was wondering whether an oversight authority should also have people that not necessarily love technology, but that may have a more critical stance because of their lack of love to technology.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I think the approach that our office has, and more generally the agency has, is there's a balance. There are opportunities when emerging technology is introduced in the marketplace. There are ways in which it can help different consumer groups. I think having a familiarity with how technology is developed helps us better understand what are the good questions to ask companies, how do we get at the key concepts, data practices, et cetera, that a company may be deploying when we issue CIDs or investigate these companies. And when we say we love technology, we want to recognize the opportunity that it has, but I think fundamentally, just by nature of the people that apply to the position and the people that we onboard, there is criticism, and we think that we can do better in the marketplace.
I also wanted to highlight, again, folks who are joining the Federal Trade Commission, we're a law enforcement agency. We are not building technology, we're not deploying it. We aren't like running around trying to like make sure products are used in people's homes. We are here trying to hold companies accountable through lawsuits. And so the people who are here have that aligned incentive to be focusing on what is out there that is harming people right now, not like future weird use cases, like the things that are like happening right under our noses. So I think that's an important thing to remember as well.
Hi, I don't want to ask you to comment on pending legislation, but if hypothetically the US were to get comprehensive data privacy legislation in the future, how would that change your role?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that we are paying very close attention to the Hill and Congress. We have an Office of Congressional Relations built into the fabric of our agency because we need to be paying attention. We do this thing called technical assistance, which is a formal way to say that we give feedback when bills are in flight. And so whatever bills, be it privacy legislation, be it something on kids and privacy, be it something else that comes down the pipeline, oftentimes we're pulled in as experts to weigh in, to give a realistic take of what is feasible, to weigh in on those topics. So we are very closely paying attention to these topics, and oftentimes are learning in real time like what is happening and how we can better steer this legislation.
And one thing I'll add to that is if in theory there was something introduced that passed, it would just shift our toolbox. So the way we think about what are the tools in our toolbox that we have right now depends on the details, of course, of the legislation, but it would change the tools that we have.
So here, so First, I would like to congratulate on the great work. I think it was very interesting everything you do, but you said in one of the answers, you are a law enforcement agency. And I will put the focus on enforcement in two things that I would put in the list of harms. I would like to comment on that. First, it's so easy to use technology now in many other ways that people couldn't do before, that the number of bad actors is increasing very fast. I don't like to say exponentially because that's never true, but much faster, and your office has some limited resources. So this is one problem that you have. And the second one is that enforcement is very hard today because technology can be hidden in many ways. It's like for example, looking for a patent, infringing a patent is so hard because they can hide it in a way that you cannot never check. And this is happening with many of the problems we have. So do you have any ideas how to solve that?
Okay, so just to confirm, you're saying more bad actors and more hidden ways to do bad things are the two things?
Yes.
Yes. That is definitely something we run into every day. In terms of more bad actors, I think the term is old dog, new tricks, where, again, like we are seeing, even if, with AI-enabled voice cloning, like people are motivated by the same things to extort people, but they're just using different tactics and tools and ways to do it. If we bring the right people into the building to better ask the right questions, hopefully, and this is a theory of why we're here, we can actually ask those right questions, examine, investigate, bring cases against these types of actions.
And one thing to add to that is the way that our office thinks about it, which Stephanie had mentioned in her speech, is we want to go upstream. So when we think about, for example, voice cloning harms and ways to mitigate, we don't want to think about every single bad actor that is a fraudster or a scammer. We want to think about the platforms that enable those fraudsters and scammers, so we're not playing a game of whack-a-mole. And so when we think about peeling back the layers, we think about what is a true source of harm, where does all of this start, so that we can actually address it from that place rather than having to go address every single person that's implementing some sort of scam.
That's where things like possible rulemaking comes in. I would look to FTC plus impersonation rule as a way that we kind of get at this more at a broad scale, regardless of the fancy technology that they're using.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to answer your second question as well, I think one thing that we try and do to better understand what companies are doing that are hard to see externally is our 6B power. So as Stephanie mentioned, we have an authority at the FTC which allows us to ask questions that companies are required to answer. And so to get at things that are otherwise unseen in the marketplace is something that we're trying to do more of. And so our AI partnership 6B is an example of that. Things that are explicitly hidden from the average consumer and that often would not be reportable to government agencies, we have an opportunity to actually uncover some of those tactics and figure out what's actually happening.
Thank you very much for this wonderful keynote. A lot of the work that is published in this conference relies on access to computing resources. And a lot of the work that you presented, and in general, this is the scope of antitrust and competition regulation all over the world, applies after the fact, after the materialization of corporate power and through harm to competition or consumers. So, and I'm trying to think now, yesterday's keynote and connected with this keynote today. Do you think that when it comes to computation and access to computing resources, is there something inherently harmful in corporate power? So even if we assume that there is no materialization of this, there is no anti-competitive action, is there something inherently harmful in having this corporate power consolidated in few actors at the first place?
On a high level, being big is not bad by itself. And so I want to maybe separate those concepts here. And maybe Amrita, you want to talk a little bit about our chips work and our cloud computing work. I think that might be helpful to us.
Yeah, so to Steph's point, it's not inherently bad to be big. What we look at is when entities or actors use their bigness to craft the marketplace, to limit choice, to make it hard for consumers to shift from their product to the other. And so there is a list of kind of indicators or proxies that show that there's a leverage, or they are leveraging aggregated power to actually manipulate the marketplace in ways that are not beneficial for consumers or other companies. And so when we're doing, for example, chips work, we look at who are the actors across that supply chain. What power do they have? How are they setting prices? How are they interfacing with other companies? How is a startup ecosystem able to compete with them? Is there an opportunity for new technology to actually be introduced? And so we do a whole, we do a lot of research, market research, to better understand what are those variables and how can we assess them with the legal framework that we have. We are not lawyers, so we punt that to the lawyers at the agency, but we'll do the initial market level research. And so we are looking at it from a chips perspective, we're looking at it from a cloud and compute access perspective. And I think fundamentally, we want to know, is it pro-competitive? Is it allowing for other companies to have an opportunity in the marketplace at a fair price, et cetera, et cetera? And so those are the kinds of things that we look at when we do this type of research.
Another anecdote that we have heard directly from startups who are trying to build something related to AI in the space, be it their own creative chatbot, be it some medical tool, is that they're afraid, they're fearful of what would happen to them, right? If they went outside of the terms of the contract with some of these large cloud computing companies. The moat may be too large for them to jump over because right now, they do not have the capital required to compete. And so that is kind of a really important layer of the FTC is we have to be the referees to kind of level that playing field because otherwise startups can't compete. And they're dropping out of the game, which allows like other incumbent companies to continue to amass more power, amass more data, amass more photos, video, and other types of data. And so I think that's kind of, it has a compounding effect. But if we do our jobs right, you know, key inflection points will be moments like now, where we can actually steer the ship, as opposed to the Web 2.0 2010s with the entrenchment of commercial surveillance.
Thank you very much. My name is Juraj. I'm chair of the Working Party on Governance of Artificial Intelligence at the OECD. Thank you very much for your valuable presentation. I have two questions, if I may. One relates to the AI. I understand that you are also active in this field. You have also issued some documents on how you think about AI, what it is actually, and how to define it. We tried hard at the OECD to come up with a unified definition that could possibly cut across fields. But maybe from your perspective and your experience, is it easy for you to distinguish between what we call AI on one hand, and the classical software, as we call it, on the other hand? That's the first question. And the second one relates to your work and how you see the judicial branch, which I understand is very important, of course, inside the government. Do you see judges accepting the way you approach your work? Do you see judges being well informed about the topics of technology and how you see the challenges there, advocating for possibly new approaches when facing questions and arguments in front of the courts? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so for your question number one, the way that we see the difference between traditional software and AI, I think fundamentally, what we do is we look across the tech stack and think about what are the different inputs that are needed and how is different digital technology actually developed. But at a fundamental level, we would actually argue that the laws apply to all of the things. And so at a principled level, we want to make sure that we are thinking about privacy in a standardized way. We're thinking about security in a standardized way. There's nuance when it comes to emerging tech like AI, thinking about how models are actually developed, the insane amount of data that needs to go in to actually train large language models, for example, how they're actually deployed, being more general purpose technologies rather than having specific use cases, as somebody had pointed out in one of the questions before. And so we approach all of these with a principled approach, and then, of course, try and break it down further based on kind of specific nuanced elements of each of these technologies. For the second question.
Second question was, are the judges listening? is the question? Okay. I would say look to the portfolio of all of the orders that we've recently come out. Seems like somebody's listening. And so it's hard for me to answer that because I'm not a judge and not a lawyer, but I will say like stuff is happening, and I think look at our orders and look at some of the stuff that I've highlighted today, and you'll see some of the responses that we've had.
Oh, okay. Thank you. First off, I think I'm getting a little PSA to hold my mic closer, or hold the mic closer to the mouth. So first off, amazing work, huge fan. Y'all are putting out hit after hit. Thank you so much. You brought up at the end there, it's better to prevent the rust than to try and clean it off after it happens. What are we not talking about yet that you think we should be?
That is a great question. There are a few things that I think our office is looking into when we think about what is the potential, for example, algorithms to be deployed in new surveillance adjacent or ways in which it could impact consumers downstream. And so there are things that currently we're researching, for example, personalized pricing, which isn't widely deployed just yet, but it's something that is emerging that more companies in earnings calls are saying that they're looking to do. And there's been a long tail discussion around it, but we haven't actually seen it materialize in the marketplace fully yet. And we're at the cusp there, and that's something that, for example, our office is trying to better understand what is happening right now, what are they doing, and is there a good time for us to intervene in which we're kind of before the curve and making sure that we can be proactive in that way.
Highlight the AI partnerships and investments piece. How are startups trying to do business? What's working? Who's dropping out? Who's acquiring? Where is the money going? Following that cash flow, I think, is really, really interesting. Like listening to what's happening with like acquisitions, with consumer offerings, with which company has the largest consumer base, who's monetizing and how they're monetizing. These are all, happening right now, like even within the past year. So much significant technological innovation has occurred, and I think we need to be paying attention to what's working and where the industry may be going next. And so I think paying attention to that is really important.
So we are really excited about the loop of having Amrita and Stephanie with us and closing that loop with research. And because of Tina Park at Partnership on AI, we are going to be having even tighter communication loop in this room. Tomorrow at lunch, FTC is having a town hall style session with open mics where you can talk about your work and engage more with them. They'll be listening more to specific people who come to the mic and share their work in order to better cross-pollinate and share awareness about the work coming out of this group of researchers. So please join me in thanking them for taking time to be with us, and I know you're feeling as galvanized as I am.